Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast, presented in part by StubHub. Take a night off from Nights In. Find great seats for amazing events near you. For more details, visit steelcityunderground.com/tickets. Today, I'm your co-host because we are doing a little thing we call the WTF podcast. That means only one thing, that Miss Terry Fletcher is back in the building. Terry, how's it going?
It's going great, Joe. Thanks for having me.
I wouldn't have it any other way. I'd like you to visit more often with all of our listeners here. We've piled some things up here into a small checklist, of which we will probably ignore half of and add other things to. But we definitely have some WTF territory to cover on today's show. Even though it's football in shorts, there are some things going on around the National Football League, or have been since the last time we got together. But before we do that, Terry, you were telling me, I know I don't want you to sweat to death over there or anything like that. I know I have to shut my the air conditioning here is so loud that I have to cut it off a little bit so you guys don't hear it on the recording. So over on your end, you're saying it's very warm. Myself, I still haven't gotten into my pool yet. Still cleaning it. We're in the middle of June already. It's not looking very good.
Yeah, we've had some June gloom, so we're pretty happy for the sun and getting out and getting some vitamin D. But it's really nice, about mid-80s and just good breezes. So we're pretty happy right now.
Yeah, it's goofy. I mean, it's threatened to rain. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does. It's made it a real hassle. I think I was telling people about staining my deck and stuff, and that thing, you have to let it like dry for 24 hours, and it was just a whole mess. I feel like I'm a month behind on everything when it comes to yard work, outdoor work, or whatever. You're in sunny Southern California, though. I mean, for me, I'm looking forward to maybe, if I'm lucky now, 8 or 9 weeks of using the pool instead of, 3.5 months. This really sucks for me. So that's definitely a WTF if there ever was one. So, but let's kick it off. Let's talk some football, because I went and I talked about hockey the last time I was on, and we got all kinds of things that are going on. I think the first one, and I know some people take this the wrong way, and I'm going to talk about the actual reaction to it in a minute, but James Harrison drug testing, posting about it. 3 drug tests appears to be like within a 10-week period. Terry, how do you feel about that? Because I have my own thoughts on whether or not it's excessive and whether or not he's being unfairly targeted. It's supposed to be a random system.
Well, what are there? They're like 1,692 active players. Well, actually, who's on, if he times the 53, man roster, time all 32 teams. But now we've also got rookies and people coming in and, free agents and all that. So, you've got, excess of 1,700 players, and you're sitting there thinking, okay, so this is random. And it just seems like he's targeted. But how do you prove that? And he's the one that's posting all the things that he's doing at 39 years old. So I think at this point, he finds it just as comical as we do, probably more frustrating because he has to do it. But at least he's not posting that they're hunting him down at somebody's bar mitzvah so that they can get him there. That was I think 3 or 4 times ago, but they find him anywhere, and I just think it's funny. I think Boswell said after he got kicked out of the Pens game, he got one too, so I think that's hilarious.
We're going to cover Boz and maybe a little bit more hockey. I do have a hockey WTF that I'd like to cover, and but no, with the James Harrison thing, I was a little perturbed by it, because some of the fans, we have like the oddest fans in Pittsburgh. They get super defensive when something is said about their players or done about their players. Now, you mentioned James Harrison doing all these feats of strength. It looks like a strongman competition at 39 years old. you see all these baseball players, or at least it's probably the thing you think of when you think about performance-enhancing drugs. I know at least I do. I think of Barry Bonds. I think of Sammy Sosa. I think about Mark McGwire. I think about all those home runs. I think about Roger Clemens at 40 years old, pitching for the Yankees. So I think there's, where there's smoke, there's fire. That could be true, but 3 times in 10 weeks is only odd because of what you mentioned. You have these expanded rosters now. They're usually 53 players, and what they'll do is during the regular season, the testing procedure. Now, there are 2 different procedures in the NFL. Most people aren't aware of this. There is a substance abuse policy, and then there's a performance-enhancing drug policy. So the substance abuse one isn't as often, from what I take it. It's like once in the offseason is all it is right now. As far as the performance-enhancing drugs, I may have this flipped, so please don't you get the pitchforks and torches out on me, because it is very confusing legal mumbo-jumbo. But what it boils down to is that James has been tested 3 times in 10 weeks, basically with a 90-player roster right now in the offseason. It's a 1 in 9 chance. Now, there are 2 players currently on the Steelers that are in a different stage or level of this testing. There's Le'Veon Bell, there's Martavis Bryant. That means they get tested maybe more randomly, more frequently. I don't think that they're part of that same pool. They could be. I don't know that for a fact. So 1 in 9 is roughly what you're looking at instead of maybe 1 in 5, because what happens is they pick 10 players per team, not 10 players in the NFL every week. And James is basically saying, well, the 3rd time within 10 weeks, I think 3 is starting to get there where it's a little excessive. Now, if it happened twice in 10 weeks, it's probably a little more on target with 1 in 9, but it depends on how you look at this. I mean, if you flip a coin 10 times, it's not going to land heads 5 times, exactly half. You have a 50% chance, but it could be heads 3 times, it could be heads 7 times. So I guess the best thing that comes out of this is that he could only be tested a maximum of 6 times in the off season. He's halfway through. So
I think so. I think the thing that people forget about him, though, is that he's in his 14th year and he's never once failed a test. And then he also posts pictures of what he does to keep his body able to do what he does at his age, between the acupuncture and, he does take, I don't know if it's called supplements, but, that powder he does before he works out, which a lot of athletes do, just as like a protein powder, whatever it is, but nothing obviously that is illegal or inappropriate for use. But it's just funny because he does so, and he does the cupping. So I think when people look at the big picture of him, instead of just saying he's 39 doing this, so he must be, I think that's where, and 14 years. I mean, how many players in his position are always hurt? So for me, the WTF here is, come on, he's proven it to you. Can you just stop already?
Yeah,
but
I think he does some of that too, just to kind of settle any doubts, I think is the best way to say it. Here, this is what I do, this is what I do, this is what I do. I mean, that's tremendous. And like all the powders, shakes, things. Hey, you know what? I used to do the very same thing in the different avenues of life that I was in when I was actually doing some bodybuilding and things of that nature as well. And there's all kinds of things you can get in trouble with out there too. So just the fact that, he knows the proper supplements and ways to recover his body and things of that nature, give the guy some credit. Now, some of the fans who jumped on this and say, yes, he's being unfairly targeted, and I had this same thing happen as well with an article about whether or not the Steelers' tight end position group was a weakness for the team. It was a question. It was, whether is it a weakness or not? And presented an argument as to, well, maybe not. And it's because other things are strengths, so it's probably the weakest unit on the offense. Anyways, by no means necessary am I slighting any of the guys that are on there. In fact, I am all for Jesse James, a pleasant surprise as a 5th-round draft pick. I'm all for supporting David Johnson, Xavier Grimble, the 2 rookies, Scott Orndorff, Faison Odom, all of these guys. And it's funny because the fans will get super defensive, but in the same light, they get incredibly critical of, this guy can't catch the ball. We need more wide receiver. We need somebody besides Antonio Brown. They need to play man coverage. Tom Brady's just going to shred them up. I don't understand it. It's bipolar to me. I don't know. What do you think about that?
It is. I think I can understand the frustration because, Pittsburgh has set such a high standard. I mean, if you're in the Browns, that you're rolling your eyes. If you're in Cleveland, that's just like, well, yeah, but at least they're trying. But in Pittsburgh, it's like, no, do your job, or we're not going to talk to you again. So totally different mentality. But I agree, people just, I don't think people understand, and it's interesting because I think for the most part they do, but you stick with your team through the good and the bad, and sometimes you can't be perfect. And so, yeah, those critical fans, sometimes I try to mute them if I can, because they just get such on a bandwagon in the opposite direction. And, the players, if you don't think they're beating themselves up when they do something, not perfect, they definitely are. So I agree. Just like, just chill out. It'll happen.
I get accused sometimes of being too optimistic. I've mentioned this before, but it's like, hey, you know what?
Well, you are, Joe. You are very optimistic.
Don't tell my wife that. She will just roll her eyes when she looks at you. So, but speaking of I don't know, this might not be bipolar or. And by no means am I poking fun at anybody who actually suffers from that. What I really mean is like a Jekyll and Hyde is how people can be hypocritical with their criticism of the football team. So, I mean, exactly. For example, Jesse James was out there in the AFC Championship game, okay? And you know what? I wish he would have scored that touchdown before half, would have made all the difference. Okay, I'm still dwelling about the game too. But speaking of Jekyll and Hyde and just craziness, you brought this to my attention. This was a tweet from an ESPN beat writer for the Baltimore Ravens, Jamison Hensley. And when I clicked and did all this and that on this thing, I landed in what I said offline. I'm like, I'm in ESPN hell. It was like it just kept switching my smartphone from screen to screen to screen between Twitter and Safari and in the ESPN app, and then there was pop-ups and everything else. But Terry, since you're the one who found this gem, why don't you go ahead and tell us what Mr. Jameson... Well, Jameson's just reporting what someone else actually thinks.
Yeah, he's talking about comparing Macklin, who's just released from Kansas City to the Ravens, and now he went to the Ravens, and trying to compare him to Antonio Brown. And I couldn't help but laugh. I mean, you basically get cut. So obviously that speaks volumes that you're not exactly in that even conversation. I'm not saying he's not a good player, but nobody cuts a player like that. They either have some trade value, or you hear something publicly about, maybe he thinks he's worth a big contract or whatever. All we heard about was that he just got married. So, that was pretty much it. He gets cut, and his cap amount was high. And so then you hear that, there was a couple of teams, Bills and Ravens, and they pick him up. And then he starts talking about the comparison to AB. And you're just like, really? Okay, well, I mean, that would be like, trying to compare the difference to me. And this is just me, but really looking at, Le'Veon Bell and saying, Ezekiel Elliott is the same. I mean, they're different players. They're both good, but Le'Veon Bell is special. AB is special. You just don't compare people like that.
And to Jameson's defense here, he does, and now he's repeating some words that came from Dean Pease, who's the defensive coordinator from the Baltimore Ravens. And Dean says, he's speaking about Jeremy Macklin here, recently signed to the Ravens. Well, he was always a guy you wanted to double. He was a little bit like 84 from Pittsburgh, and and
I can't even hear that on playback and not laugh.
Yeah, I mean, and Jameson does temper expectations here, because he goes, it's difficult to compare Macklin or most receivers to Brown. It would be overly optimistic to expect Macklin to put up numbers anywhere close to Brown, but wait, there's more. Macklin's past 2 full seasons, mind you, 2014 and 2015, because he did not play a full season in 2016. There were 3 receivers in the NFL to produce over 170 receptions, at least 800 yards, and 17 touchdowns, and that would be Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham Jr., who's one of your favorite people, and Jeremy Macklin. So, oh my goodness, there's so many different ways. One WTF, going back to Macklin, and you mentioned it. He skipped his honeymoon for his wedding, or put it off. So
to be at OTAs.
Yeah, to be at their OTAs, and then they released them. That's totally a WTF. And then
he's gonna be like, really?
On the other hand, you got Odell Beckham Jr., who skipped the OTAs. Everyone said, oh, he's holding out for a contract. Then he came out and said, I wasn't holding out for a contract. I just needed some time. What was it, to find myself and evaluate life, or something along those lines? And then you're like, wait a minute.
What? I know. And that's why I call him a head case. I mean, yeah, I could have a whole show just dedicated to a WTF about, OBJ. He's not my favorite. But just getting back to Macklin, I think what he'll do for Joe Flacco is, Joe Flacco thinks that he's got the talent that we do and throws these, picks into these small windows that you just can't do with what he's got. And he doesn't have Steve Smith anymore. He doesn't have, any playmakers. So he probably will make, Joe Flacco look a little better. But it's just the comparison is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But then we lead into the touchdown celebrations and we hope that they don't have any like we're going to have. But you want to tackle that one? When I saw that they eased that after how much AB got fined last year, and one was definitely the twerking. I think that was a little over the top, but some of his stuff is fantastic to watch, and you just get happy, and it's fun, and you can't help but laugh, and and then they sit there and they're like, yeah, but that will be $12,000. It's like, and then you see other teams where they're jumping into Salvation Army buckets and doing dances with cheerleaders and nothing. So
on the very same day, no less, and this happened.
Yeah.
And this happened, I had an article about it with some film clips you could dig up somewhere on the website. We got a little search icon. You could put in touchdown celebrations or something of that matter. It was Emmanuel Sanders was the one I really, and that's, what is that? The Young Money crew or whatever they were calling themselves,
right.
With Wallace when they were here. And in AB. And AB, of course, he twerks. And this was a previous WTF a long time ago. Maybe one of the first episodes of this that we ever did. And we were joking whether or not he had 2 or 3 thrusts was maybe the limit because, Sanders just gave like maybe 1.5 to 2 and nothing, no flag for Sanders and no fine, no nothing. And the weird thing is that Antonio Brown did that on Monday Night Football, the opening week of the season, week 1, and Sanders was like week 3 against the Bengals, I want to say. So if Antonio Brown, and I'm assuming he's the poster child here, he's the guy they dig up film on when they show it to the referees, however they do. I don't know if they get together in like a classroom setting or if they have like a webinar type deal, but you got to think that there's some communications that go out, memos that go out every week, multiple times a week where, hey, this is a message from the league. This is what they want us to crack down on. These are the things that happened. You can't tell me that they relaxed that after fining Antonio Brown last year. And they certainly didn't say it publicly. And then, as you said, Ezekiel Elliott running into the Salvation Army kettle or pot or whatever you want to call it. That's on Thanksgiving. You have Antonio Brown in Indianapolis. He gets 2 different flags on in that game against the Colts. So he had 3 celebration calls against him in 2016.
Well, and the thing is too is that I think the thing that I don't like about the new rule is it says anything suggestive, obviously, sexual innuendo and inappropriate. And to me, that's a subjective thing. That means it's whatever that older line judge thinks is inappropriate. And, when you start to bring the human element into it, you and I might have different things of what we think is appropriate or not. I have a 22-year-old daughter. You have a younger daughter. How old is your daughter? Like
three and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you would want her to see versus what mine sees without my permission. I mean, because there's nothing I can do about it, are going to be on different levels. And so, I think that once you bring that in, you're like, WTF, seriously? I mean, so who's going to be making these decisions? Is it New York? Is it a collective? Can you now... can you appeal the celebration if you get a 15-yard penalty on it? It's just ridiculous. So when I saw that, and then AB came out and said, now it's going to be part of the team celebration. Now, in all this, I'm happy they relaxed it, but let's not get the focus off winning the game. That's the only thing I worry about, that I could see this getting bigger than it is. Basically it just means less. I would think it just means, less fines for the players, but I have a feeling that we're going to see AB, maybe even Le'Veon, and, taking it to a new level of, that's going to be part of our game, which to me would be funny, but our ultimate goal is to win. So, hopefully they relax and all that.
There was everything. There was the Super Bowl shuffle. There's
I know.
Icky Woods. There's all these different great celebrate. You had, I remember when the Falcons, when they got in there with Dan Reeves. What was it? His last name was Dwight. He was the kick returner. He used to do the coconut thing where he was drinking out of the football, and
Well, look at what like Victor Cruz does his salsa dancing, and you have so many things out there where guys are individual, and it's great. I mean, you got the spike from Gronk, you've got everything, and so you can't do the pylon still though. That's still there. I think as soon as Gronk made it go crooked, and it took them forever to make that not be crooked, I think they said, yeah, we're going to leave that one in there. So
it reminds me of Shaquille O'Neal breaking all the backboards in the NBA, and now you got these like ridiculous looking hoops that are indestructible.
Right.
So
Exactly.
they made some rules from hanging on the rim and things of that nature too. So I mean, the game does evolve in that regard. Apparently, they never have watched soccer where these guys in fact, Emmanuel Sanders did a cartwheel and didn't get a flag either. So I guess I won't say that, but
But what'll be interesting, Joe, is that now that Dean Blandino has stepped down, and things are going to be much more they say New York reviewed. It'll be interesting to see if the new person that's going to be the VP in charge of rules and some of these things, if he's out to make a statement, or if he's just going to keep things consistent as Dean did, which we know we didn't always agree with. So, that'll be interesting.
Dean was put in a very precarious position. I could certainly feel as an official myself that Dean, I mean, how bad does that job have to be that he leaves for a position with NFL Network? I mean, I don't necessarily agree that he believed some of the things that he said, or did he agree with some of the things he said? And I think him stepping down has a lot to do with that, in that he had to make you believe that, even though he didn't necessarily believe it. And there was a lot of tough things that came out. I think Dean was also still the head when you had the replacement refs. You had that crazy Seattle and Green Bay game where it was like the whatever catch, and then you had the same thing with was it Des Bryant in the playoffs, and
Catch or no catch.
Yeah, just some wild things that have happened. So I do wish him well. It probably helps his sanity just having a regular job where he's not receiving calls day and night and having everybody just, he's the guy, he's the scapegoat there. So, I mean, sooner or later, I have a feeling it was just going to be a change regardless. And now they've added some other people in here. And I don't know if this review system will be any different. They're talking about with the amount of time it takes on TV. All I say is just, people want consistency and they want things that make common sense. I think not throwing flags and fining people for celebrations that aren't maybe lewd, or just, okay, if you run the ball all the way out to the 50-yard line and dance on the star like not Dion. Was it Dion that did it, or was it Terrell Owens?
I think it was T.O.
I think it was T.O. I know T.O. had pom-poms, and T.O.'s done the Sharpie, and you had Joe Horn with the Saints
Popcorn,
years ago. Joe Horn had a cell phone hidden in the pad. Okay, all of those things they're delaying your game. I mean, it's
I don't think you can still use a prop. I think they said you can use the football, but you can't, when AB goes in and runs and hugs the goalpost. I don't think he can do that still. But can he do a flip in there? Yes, except that coach will kill him if he tries that again. Antonio Brown is amazing, but he's also 29, and we need to save those knees for his speed. So
Ben's gonna kill him.
So and then and so just talking about that step down with Dean Blandino and stuff. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But that isn't the only person going into broadcasting. We've got a couple players now that former quarterbacks that are heading that direction. So Romo and Cutler, and that was interesting seeing what CBS and Fox Sports 1, especially CBS over Phil Simms. And Phil Simms, he makes my ears bleed. I just get so sick of hearing him. So. But I don't see where Romo has a voice as far as he might have quarterback knowledge. But have we ever heard him talk except on a Barbara Walters special? I mean, does he even know how to be on TV? I mean, obviously, you would have had to have some kind of an interview. They did say on Fox Sports that Cutler had an interview, and they were shocked about. They actually said that. We were really surprised and shocked about how much finesse he has, and he's a straight talker, and he doesn't talk around things, and his football IQ is really impressive. So And do either one of these people have an out in case somebody says I need a starter for injury? So that's what I think would be the WTF. All of a sudden they get on TV and, some quarterback goes down and, the Browns are like, yeah, you're right. Brock Osweiler isn't the answer. Tony, do you want to lead the Browns to, at least winning 5 games? So what will happen at that point? So I don't know. That's to me the WTF. Who will go back into football this year?
Yeah, I don't blame either of those guys. I mean, this is a steady job. You see a lot of players who blow through their money. They're not good with their finances. They don't necessarily transition well into life after football. This could turn into a nice career for either one of those men. If I were them, I would not give that up for definitely not the Browns quarterback job. Now, in my position where I'm at, sure, I will, because that's a nice payday compared to, anything else. But if you're in the broadcasting position, another WTF to add on that is Rex Ryan. And now I guess I don't remember her name, but she's done college football games, et cetera, et cetera. They paired her with Rex Ryan. I guess it was a really big deal. This isn't the WTF part of it, by the way, that they're having a female play-by-play or person in the commentary booth for Monday Night Football for Week 1, because they're going to have a doubleheader. They're going to have 2 games on. So one of those
I didn't even realize Rex Ryan got a position. So
and that's not even the WTF. He may not make it there because he got in some drunken brawl with his brother. Down in Florida or something. So
that's what I just thought. It was videoed, and they had they have assault charges pending and something silly like that. But I didn't realize he was making it to the media forum. But what's weird about the quarterback going into TV is that Cutler's made a boatload of money, and so is Tony. And TV work is 6 figures, not 7. So I'm just really surprised that they haven't either saved their money or they don't have enough to retire on and obviously want to do something else. But, why isn't either one of them coaching or, teaching or doing something that's not just, talking about football? Why don't they put some of that information to good use to, the up and comers? But it's just interesting to me.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I do believe also not just the steady job in life after football, but life after football, including their health. And we both know that Tony Romo and Jay Cutler have not been very successful at staying healthy throughout their football careers. But we're going to move on from them, of course, and just some other hoopla. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it deserves another WTF, since Brian just did this on the last episode and spoke for 45 minutes on all of these contract talks. Folks, it takes some time to hammer these things out. I do understand we have 2 persons with different tenders. We have a franchise tag on Le'Veon Bell that hasn't been signed, and Alejandro Villanueva with his exclusive rights tender that hasn't been signed. But seriously, anyone who's saying someone's holding out or someone's doing this or doing that, it's just put the brakes on it. It's like, WTF, when somebody doesn't show for 1 day of something, it's not the end of the world. There's usually a good reason for it. Maybe there's something else that's going on in their personal life. I mean, remember Antonio Brown, and I'm putting the figurative quotes in the air with my fingers, held out last year. He shows up the next day with the Rolls Royce, said he's not holding out. He was never holding out. It's just... it's just such a knee-jerk reaction.
I think with Bell, it's tough, only because, in my opinion, and I listen to Brian, and I think I probably have a different opinion. I think with multiple injuries, not completing a full season and into playoffs, 2 suspensions. I know he's matured now, but I'd like to see a full season without a suspension, without injuries, played through the playoff season, where we don't lose him at all, not even once. And then, so play on your franchise tag, and then, I'd sign him. But that's me. So obviously I'm not in the front office, but that's what I'd like to see. As far as, Alejandro Villanueva, I have so much respect for that man, not just for serving our country, but, just how much he's learned being a left tackle and how quickly he's picked up the position. And I know there's a lot out there that say he's not the best, but he got all of his NFL bonuses from how well he did do, and I think he's in the above average category, and I hope they're working on a long-term solution, because look at all these players that are in fact holding out and he's not. So, he's showing respect to the organization, to the position, and really just who he is, and I really hope they figure out a way to get him signed. So but he's saying it's all his agent. So the WTF on all of this is people. OTAs are voluntary. As much as we'd like to see their presence there, we're ready for football to start. They don't have to show up. There's no fine. And since, they haven't signed their tender, they don't have to show up. They're not under contract. So
that's true. Yeah, even for the handful of 2-3 days of minicamp that existed, that was the only mandatory part. And you know what? I still respect Bell too, because you see some of the nonsense like with Odell Beckham not showing up, and it's mandatory, and he's still under his rookie contract. We didn't see Bell do that last year. In fact, he was coming back from an injury, and he was out there and rehabbing, and he worked himself back into tremendous shape. I know a lot of people were, including myself. I remember when he was drafted, and I'm like, wow, they passed on Eddie Lacy. There's a different situation there all to itself. So I think it's just that, with Eddie Lacy missing as many games as he did, you look at it as a conditioning standpoint. You look at it as, is this guy dedicated to the game? And I'd say Bell is dedicated to it. And I think this is just all ado over nothing. Now, another all ado over nothing. If you're hockey fans, what do you usually do if you're going to be sitting right up against the glass? You're going to pound on it, right? Well, apparently, according to Chris Boswell, and he was there with one of his friends, he pounded on the glass a little bit and got thrown out of the last home game for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But those guys are really having some fun there and supporting the team. But, it's like the kicker got thrown out of the game, and he didn't make a big deal about it. He just, he just took it as it was. It was the end of the game, and he left. But
did you see what Cam Hayward said today at practice? So Teresa Varley was interviewing him after practice today, and they said, "What do you think about Chris Boswell getting kicked out of the Pens game?" He goes, "We keep telling him you can pound on the glass 3 times, not 4." And so to me, that reminds me of the twerking that AB did. Okay, you can thrust 2, not 3. So I think they were messing with them, and it was just funny to me. And he even said it was funny. He's like, "Yeah, I think now because I apparently I'm a tough guy. Watch my drug test come in the mail." So that was funny to me. He was like, "Really?" But it was kind of silly.
Yeah, and I spotted Cam at the at one of the Penguins games at Game 2 of the Stanley Cup. I got to hang out there, which was very cool, by the way. Really still second to none to being at Heinz Field, especially a playoff game at Heinz Field. But geez, Stanley Cup was a pretty intense situation. And he had his nice custom number 97 Hayward Penguins jersey, which was cool too. But I bet you he's even saying WTF. We're talking about officiating. We're talking about hockey. Everyone that's complaining about the goal that was taken away from the Nashville, or as I call them, Trashville Predators. And it's just like, hey, look, did anybody else see from the referee's perspective that the goalie's leg was trapped against the goalpost? Like, everyone continues to miss that fact. Whistles blown, and even if that, the decision is made by the referee at that time, regardless of when his lips hit the whistle, the decision has already been made. It's going to be disallowed. So quit crying about it. How many power plays did the Predators get? Because I didn't see the Penguins get any, and they still put in a goal, and then, of course, the one for good measure there on the empty net to seal the deal and bring back-to-back Stanley Cup championships home. Very cool, but WTF, man.
They had four power plays. We had done, and one of them was a 3-on-5, and I'm sorry if you cannot score a goal with a 3-on-5. But you know what I really think this all boils down to, and I'm going to bring it back to football. Somebody disrespected the terrible towel and put a catfish in it and threw it on the ice. You know what? We keep telling them, Joe, you just don't do it. And look what happens.
That Myron Cope. That curse.
They just don't get it. It may not have happened in the game that it happened, but it happened overall. And we came back with the trophy and the cup. And so, you know what? Such is life. You got to learn. But then just and following up with that, now we're getting into football, hopefully season soon, and looking at what Keith Butler and man coverage and everything we have to do. It seems like our focus is just to beat the Patriots. Every other team, we're like, we can beat them. Well, now we got to figure out how to beat our little brother.
Yeah, and what Keith Butler, this was reported by Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, and this is just a real quick, short quote that I actually turned into a full-fledged article, 140 characters. But just reading into this and some of the things that people were commenting and replying back with, I'm just rolling my eyes. It says, Keith Butler clear on what he wants. 4-man rush, flexibility in coverage, parentheses, man, matchup zone, traditional zone. besides man and zone coverage, what exactly do you have there? I mean,
yeah, I'm like, what?
So basically he wants everything. He just wants what you normally have. Most teams that play a 4-3, they have 4 defensive linemen. That's a 4-man rush. You send anything else that might be considered a blitz. The Steelers have 3 defensive linemen out there, maybe a third of the time, 2 at other times. They might send a linebacker. Well, they're going to send a linebacker in a traditional 3-4. They send a defensive back. And you know what I mean? It's not a blitz. This is just saying they're going to play defense, and maybe they play a little closer to the line of scrimmage. I don't know. But, geez, oh, man, you want to talk about saying a whole lot of nothing but not saying anything at all. You might as well just say, hey, we're going to put 11 people on the field. I mean, that's the way I think it.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is that now that Gronkowski's healthy, I think that we're hoping that, TJ Watt can stop him, and somebody back there can stop him because – we can get to Brady if we're smart. It's just we got to stop that. That he's back in the game, and he wasn't when we played them last year. So I think we can get past him if we're smart about it. And with some of the new players that we've got, we just gotta hopefully do that. But Keith Butler definitely needs to step up his game, and otherwise, talk about people getting salty and being critical. They're going to start pointing fingers at the coaching staff. So, and which is sad because, divisional round and now AFC championship round, again, the standards in Pittsburgh, unless you win, it's kind of like, to me, it's the Tiger Woods of football. When Tiger doesn't win a tournament and he's in top 5, people are like, God, he really sucked today. And we're just like, you guys, we were 1 game away from getting to the Super Bowl. And can you imagine if we got there and didn't win? We would have. But still, it's just funny to me because they're never satisfied. And there's teams out there that don't have winning seasons. And they're like, we just really want to win some games. We'll think about getting to the playoffs later. We never have that mentality. And so, which is great. That's a great non-mentality to have. But people just need to just relax. It'll happen. So
you don't win 3 you don't go to the playoffs 3 years in a row and win 2 division titles by just changing everything. So
right, exactly.
Tom Brady, he kind of sliced up this defense that goes by the name Legion of Boom. People forget that. So, just putting that into perspective, that's supposed to be one of the greatest defenses that ever played. Now, the Broncos were able to squeak out one against them in one of these AFC championship games with a very solid defense as well. So, they're getting there. I don't think the Steelers are quite to the level of either of those, but they've got the talent and potential to do so. But Terry, you know what? It's always great having you on. Yes, it is. It's time. I hate having to leave you, as you know, but Well, we have to get back to our real jobs, so. Yeah, and real lives and everything else that goes on. So. You can follow Terry at Terry N. So Caliph on Twitter, and she always has some hot takes. Isn't that right? So give her a follow. And until next time, folks, like I said, I am your gracious co-host, Joe Kuzma. Thank you for listening. Our host today, this is her platform, the WTF podcast with Terry Fletcher. Be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.